Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Hattie Brett, the editor of Grazia, and I'm delighted to be here today to welcome you to the first of the BSME Live series, where we talk to industry legends for their insight. And because of this strange world that we're in, we get literally a window into their world or into their homes. So today, I'm delighted to be joined by Alexandra Shulman. Thank you for being here. The woman who edited British Vogue for an incredible 25 years, a tenure that saw her interview royalty, first ladies, and pretty much every designer you've heard of, as well as influence a lot of the clothes that I'm sure we all still have in our wardrobes today. 3 years ago, she walked away from the top job. And since then, perhaps handily for these current times, she's been perfecting the art of working from home, writing a column for the Mail on Sunday, and your latest book, Clothes and Other Things That Matter, which is brilliant. And I really recommend everyone read it if you haven't. And I have no doubt Alexandra has also been keeping a keen eye on the machinations of the current magazine world too. So thank you for being here today. And before we talk about Vogue, I guess, I wanted to kind of start by acknowledging this insane scenario that we're in. And I don't think I'm still used to it. 5 months into a global pandemic, I'm speaking to you from my house to your house on Zoom and broadcasting to over 100 other homes. How has lockdown been for you personally and professionally? What tips have you got?
Firstly, Hattie, thanks for all that really nice introduction. And thanks to the BSME for having me. Lockdown's been absolutely fine for me at home. I've been very lucky. I've got a garden sort of behind me and a park in front of me. So it's, even when we were at our most kind of locked down, it was very easy to be outside. And I've been working quite hard because although publishing a book in lockdown was not the dream scenario. I mean, literally every festival, and I had about 50 to promote the book, have been cancelled. Instead, one's had to just do tons and tons of self-promotion and online things like this, talking about it. So in a way, it gave me something to do other than fret in lockdown. Yeah. I had a kind of a real purpose. But I have to say that, I'm not someone who felt like, oh, well, it's fine. It's quite nice having the time to oneself. I felt very, very depressed by the idea of what's happening to our country, what's happening to London, what's happening to the world. And actually, I'm not somebody who thrives on not being able to go out and about and see people and do different things. And I've really realized that that's been what, yes, I'm fed up with cleaning the bathroom and cooking the meals and everything, but more important, I'm sort of, I'm longing to get out there to the galleries. I want to go to the theatre. I want to go and meet people I don't already know, all of that.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier about how empty the streets are and shops are, and kind of how nerve-wracking, I suppose, that is for the future of the economy and the country, and I suppose pertinently for those of us on this call, for the media and for the industry that we're in. What's your take on the future of magazines? Which ones will survive and why?
Well, that was, the big conversation before COVID-19, wasn't it? I mean, I don't think I had one professional conversation, which wasn't about, do you think Vogue will survive? Do you think magazines will survive? What's going to happen with print media? And before this, I very much felt that it would be the survival of the fittest or the survival of the most unique. I think we were seeing a kind of, a lot of more kind of niche magazines actually doing quite well and indeed starting up, much smaller little enterprises, but actually knowing their audience and therefore attracting the advertisers and the circulation for them, or otherwise, sort of big luxury productions like Vogue, sort of doing perfectly well. I mean, I'm not privy to their sales figures, and I'm sure they're down, but they're not having as bad a time as some people have. Newspapers, obviously, it's a car crash because people aren't going out there and buying a daily paper at the moment. Having had the COVID-19, I don't know. I do have a sense that the entertainment that magazines can bring is something that people really value, and the kind of just the sort of aspirational side, not in terms of it being necessarily expensive, but being able to see houses, recipes, travel in this sort of edited and informational and experienced between two covers. I don't know. I feel like maybe that will be quite helpful when we come out of this. Not sure.
I mean, I definitely think there's a new value and a new appreciation of holding something in your hand, especially in these days when we're, spending 9 until whatever time on Zoom, on calls. There's something refreshing now and a new appreciation of physical products, which is nice to see. If you were at Vogue today, if you were a magazine editor today, what would you be doing? What should we all be doing? Asking for a friend.
Well, I really admired how you on Grazia, you did those early covers of the, the NHS and the kind of key workers. I think you were the first magazine I saw to do that, and you were really quick off the mark, and I thought that was absolutely great. Now I feel like I want to see inspiring things, beautiful things. I don't want to see sort of depressing images. That I want to feel that there's a future out there. So I think I would be trying to create as optimistic publication as I possibly could.
Yeah. That's interesting, optimism and hopefulness. And I was reading something recently saying that the appetite for COVID news has rapidly declined amongst women specifically, and younger women specifically, which I think is interesting in that sense of what you're saying. People maybe now want a bit of escapism, as well as because of the doom and gloom that we're reading everywhere else.
Yeah.
I should have also said at the beginning, I'm obviously asking Alexandra all the questions I want to know, but if any of you watching have got questions, please do put them in the chat or in the Q&A forum, and we will definitely be picking them up towards the end of the session. So ask anytime and ask now so that you get your question in and it gets answered. And Alex, we've talked about the now then, I suppose, and I kind of want to circle back to the beginning of Vogue, if you can remember those days. I was reading your book recently, and you talked about the black suit that you bought for your first day at Vogue, feeling like it was something that the Vogue editor should wear. And talking about Nigel feeling a sense of sort of dread of almost not wanting what was about to happen. What do you remember about those early days, and what was your mission when you first got to Vogue?
Well, with 1992, so it's back in the dark ages, and I remember I wasn't nervous particularly or frightened, I don't think. I just did kind of have this slight feeling that my life was going to change, and possibly not in a good way, but I didn't really know why, because I was quite happy doing what I was doing, which was editing GQ magazine, and I'd made a success of that, so I sort of had everything to lose by going to Vogue. I'd had to push myself to do that, and I remember sort of going in there and walking into the office, and what was weird was that I had been features editor there 2 years previously, so I'd always seen Elizabeth Tilberis, my predecessor, in that office behind the desk, and everybody going in and out, and she was the boss, and it was a kind of weird feeling to walk into that room and that be me, and a definite sense that there were people in that office who just kind of thought, really, her.
How did you own the room then? What have you learned about that and about?
Well, I immediately moved where the desk was. That was mainly because there were double doors into an open plan office, and Liz faced out into that office. And I did not want to spend my day being stared at through the double doors by everybody and everything. So I immediately moved my desk to an area where it wasn't quite so obvious, what my face was saying or who I was having a meeting with or whatever. So I suspect people thought that there was something bad about that. But anyway, I didn't care. I did that.
It worked.
Well, I guess it worked in retrospect. And well, my mission actually, and it's quite interesting looking at the magazine now, or maybe not right now, but sort of over the last few years and everything, I think, because my mission was very much to take it away from being a magazine that was about quite so much about sort of fashion per se, and it was more about sort of every woman, and to bring in sort of more of the readers' voices and what your average woman might be wearing and shopping. For instance, I bought in much more cheap clothes and the high street. I remember we did a high street supplement, and like the whole of Bond Street was kind of, we're going to pull the advertising, Vogue isn't meant to be about the high street, which now seems to be, you can't believe that would happen. And more journalism, actually, more writing, much more writing, but many more words in, I guess, because that's what I was interested in as well, and that was more of my comfort zone as well, that I could commission pieces. But it was a long time ago, so it's a bit hard to remember.
Did you have a clear idea of who the reader was that you wanted to talk to and attract?
Yeah, I think I always felt that the reader was, well, I write about it in the book, actually, and I had this vision of a woman who's working in London and she's commuting, and she goes on the train from Waterloo sort of into the home counties, basically. And she doesn't have a great deal of money, and Vogue is her treat. It's what she buys every month on a Friday. She gets onto that train and she kind of metaphorically kicks her shoes off, has a glass of Prosecco, as it were, in her head, and reads Vogue. And I could, I could see that woman. She was probably in her early 30s, maybe she had one child or something or other, but she wasn't a particular high flyer. And I always saw it sort of pitched at that level, really.
And I think that's, interesting, putting the reader first above what advertisers might want or the fashion industry might want. I think that's a really interesting insight. And as you say, probably sometimes got you in some hot water or didn't go down brilliantly well. How did you deal with some of the elitism, I suppose, in the fashion industry, and how did you cope with that?
Well, I knew that I'd been given the job on that ticket, so it was something that had been discussed. It was what I had pitched, that it should be a little less elitist, that it should be a sort of broader economic demographic, apart from anything else. And so I knew I had the support of my bosses behind me, but it wouldn't have lasted if the sales hadn't worked. I mean, that's one thing you learn about bosses, is they can support you until it doesn't work. And then suddenly those pillars are made of salt, they crumble. And for me, my magazine was my remit was very much about selling copies. And that was quite different in a way, because Vogue had founded on the idea that it didn't need to sell that many copies, because it was, the advertisers were coming to an affluent readership. And in fact, it almost, at one point, there was an idea that if you sell too many copies, then obviously they're not all going to be affluent enough, so it'll put the advertisers off. But that had bitten the dust with the success of, for instance, Marie Claire, that had entered the market and was managing to get like Chanel, Dior, Yves Saint Laurent advertising all in, and do very kind of popular stories for an growing circulation. So that whole concept, although within the industry I was probably not admired for doing it. And to some extent, I think maybe, throughout my tenure there, my slightly populist tendencies probably weren't to everyone's cup of tea. I did know what I was trying to do, and that was, sell copies. So from the cover right through to the editorial.
And as you say, I mean, that worked, and you increased circulation, increased ad revenue, and I'm sure the bosses at Condé Nast were very happy with you. When you look back at Vogue, though, what's the thing you're most proud of? Do you have a favourite issue, or is that like asking you to choose a favourite child?
I don't have, given how many issues I must have done, I can't remember, it's like 300 and something, 60 or something. I don't have a favourite issue. I'm most proud of the ones that I thought had kind of originality of ideas in them, and least interested in the ones where I'd kind of like have 5 fashion stories, 12 pages of features, 100 cutouts of things front of book that were easy to wear, which was kind of the basic formula of what you could do in 10 beauty pages. I thought I liked the ones where you threw the whole thing up in the air and it came down differently. So I loved like the centenary issue, the millennium issue, the themed issues. And I think, I would have quite enjoyed this period, because I imagine it does give you license in a way to experiment and to throw that up. And I think if you're an editor, that is sort of what you like doing. You like to play around with it a bit.
Yeah, totally. I mean, hearing you say that makes me think of this time, because you have had to rip everything up and start again, and there is a slight gulp, heart sinks moment, but also it's exciting, isn't it, to do something different and to feel that you've done something original.
Often that doesn't actually necessarily magazines are interesting, because my magazine was judged on newsstand sales. So it was, so we'd have this, which I'm sure you do, the same amount of subscriptions and foreign sales. They were kind of a given. But if I'd done well, it was judged on newsstand, how many people were going over there, handing over their £3 or £4 or whatever it was. And those people were judging it a lot on the cover. They didn't know what was inside, obviously, until they'd bought it or they'd flick through. But the pressure to draw people in from that was, I think, different to nowadays, actually, because newsstand sales are down anyway. So I think what magazine, the way it appeals to people is slightly different, probably. I mean, this is something you would know, and I probably don't.
Yeah, I'm interested in your take on what you think makes or made in your time and makes now a successful cover, because I do think that conversation is changing, isn't it? Around, it's not just getting someone to pick up on the newsstand, it's causing a story in itself on social and getting that image to travel. Those things are almost as important, and telling a story about the brand that you want to be out there, I think, today. But what were you looking for from a cover? What do you think makes a successful cover?
Well, as you say, I think it's very different now to then. I mean, I look at the covers of my old magazine, and I just think there is no way that I would have been allowed to publish those covers. I mean, literally in the cover meeting, it would have been, have you got anything else you can show us? Because they're much more about a kind of brand message and a kind of continuing conversation. Whereas, mine was much more, the girl of the moment in a nice looking dress. That's kind of what did it. That's what people were talking about. Gwyneth Paltrow in a pink Ralph Lauren, or Alexa Chung in a pair of denim jeans and a white shirt, or Kate Moss in practically anything,
Yeah.
There were big differences, that they sold issues. And often if I put something a little bit more left field on, somebody a bit less conventional looking, I mean, even to the extent, honestly, that if somebody had red hair, they probably sold less.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about the centenary issue, talking of covers, because one of the things I was intrigued in your book was that that wasn't the cover image of the Duchess of Cambridge that you originally were going to go with and wanted to go with. Now, obviously, that project, you know, a centenary issue of an institution like British Vogue, working with the Duchess of Cambridge, how much pressure is there on that? And come on, give us some dirt. Like, what was it really like? What was the hardest thing about working with her team, or the most surprising thing?
Okay, so the shoot was really very, very easy. I mean, they were all great, and the Duchess had said, you know, I had wanted to do, you know, tiaras and ball gowns, you know, that's what I'd
Why not?
Mind. And she had made it clear that that wasn't what she wanted to do, that she wanted to do something that she felt would reflect her more, and I'm sure didn't what, you know, had in mind the legacy of her mother-in-law, late mother-in-law, and those Vogue covers and everything, and just wanted to go down a different route. And you have to remember also that this was done as a collaboration with the National Portrait Gallery as well. So they were looking for a kind of portrait for the collection. Anyway, so we came out, it was going to be jeans and check shirts and T-shirts and dungarees and the things that she wore at home. And that's the way she wanted to go. So that's the way we went. And the shoot was actually unbelievably great. It was one of the best days. You know, the sun came out, it was freezing cold, she was a dream, everyone was happy. There's actually somewhere a really great cover picture that I wanted that she didn't even want in the mix, and it was completely different, and it's hidden in a drawer somewhere, and when I'm dead someone will find it.
I need to see that. I want to see it.
But nobody saw that, and so that was good. And then the difficulties came when we were trying to decide between us. So the photographer had his idea of what he wanted. National Portrait Gallery, they were pretty cool about whatever we wanted. The Duchess had ideas about which one she preferred, and I obviously had ideas about which one I preferred. And I did think that we were going to go for a kind of full-length picture of her striding in a pair of jeans and a Burberry check shirt and a pair of jeans, high-waisted jeans. She looked like a girl in an Annie Leibovitz picture, strolling through the prairies with, you know, long hair and everything. And for some reason, she didn't like that. Oh, I think maybe it was Josh, the photographer, who didn't like that. Anyway, neither of them much like that in the end. So, you know, we kept on sort of thinking we'd got it, and then we hadn't got it. And the one in the end, that the one that actually was used was not one of anyone's first edits, I don't think. Which is often the way with things that come to the fore, like Booker Prize winners are very rarely, you know, the one that everybody agreed was going to win to start off with. You know, always this kind of process that you go through. And actually, I think my art director pulled it out or something, and we looked at it, and suddenly her face was just so appealing. It was just had this real strong eye contact, and she really liked that picture. And I was worried because she's wearing a suede trench coat, and we're coming out in June, and she's got a hat on, and I never really like hats. But in the end, by this time, we were like, you know, it was yesterday, the picture, you know, it had, it was like, okay.
And maybe there's a lesson in that sometimes it's the unexpected, sometimes it's the unexpected shot that actually ends up making it.
Yeah,
and pretty soon after that issue, you decided to walk away from Vogue 3 years ago now. Is that right? I think.
Yeah, 3 years ago. 2016. Well, I left 3 years ago. Actually, it was 3.5 years ago I decided to leave.
What prompted you, to leave the job, the top job?
25 years. 25 years and a sudden Damascus conversion. I thought about leaving a lot at various points during that period. You know, there were various points where I found having a child and doing that job very difficult, or points where I felt that something had gone wrong, and I was just like, I'm not going to do this anymore, you know, and that kind of thing. And then something had always propelled me to stay, and then I really wanted to stay and do the centenary because I knew it was going to be a big deal, and I wasn't going to let anyone else get their hands on that kind of legacy year. And actually, I wanted after it, I was so kind of buzzed about how well it had gone. You know, I was really excited about what I could do with Vogue and brand extensions and sort of digital initiatives and everything, and I really thought I was going to stay. But I woke up one day and I had this kind of vision that actually I'd got this shiny kind of future ahead of me if I left. And if I stayed, I was lugging around this past with me. But I had to kind of get a move on because I was 59, I think, 58, 59. And I thought, you know, if I don't leave soon, it's going to be that much harder to work out what I want to do and be able to do it. And I just kind of, from that moment, I just thought, actually, this is really exciting. I mean, frightening, yeah, but really exciting. So.
And has it felt as freeing and as exciting as you hoped? How's it been readjusting to life outside?
Well, I was on cloud 9 for sort of the first kind of 3-4 months, you know. I just couldn't believe how nice it was to not have to go into the office. It was the summer. I left in June, so, you know, and I took a lot of holiday. So it was through till about October, I guess, you know. It was all very nice. And then since then, there've been moments when I've been worried about, was I going to get enough work? You know, how was that going to work? I always knew that would be an issue. And I was very lucky that I got the Mail on Sunday column, which one is a nice kind of retainer to have, but two also gives me a way of being able to think about things and tell people what's going on in my mind a bit. And then writing the book, once I'd got the idea for the book, I felt much happier because then I kind of knew what I was doing. But all in all, yes, it's been amazing. I mean, it is still for me amazing to feel that I can just wander around the neighbourhood on Wednesday at 2:00 in the afternoon. You know.
Yeah. And prepared you well for this world that we're now in.
Yeah,
which is handy.
And prepared me well, exactly.
Right, I'm going to look at some questions now and do this slightly technical thing that I'm not still used to. So we have one from Abby, who works at Bauer. Hello, Abby. She says she currently works in publishing at Bauer. However, her dream is to work on a fashion magazine. Have you got any tips or advice on how she and others can break into the industry? Which is a really good question because I'm sure loads of people want to know that.
Yeah, well, I think right now is not the time to kind of change direction, would be the first thing I would say, because you're pushing a rock uphill right at the moment. When things get back to normal, you need to really pull together a very clear idea of what you think you could bring to the fashion side of it, because there are different ways of working in the fashion side. You know, it can be more on a kind of executive editor side where you're helping to kind of organize the fashion. Obviously, if you want to be a fashion editor and do shoots, you're going to have to start right at the bottom and be an assistant or maybe work with a public relations company and see if you can sort of start working on their lookbooks and things like that. PR isn't a bad halfway house, actually. I don't know what you think, Hattie, for getting into fashion. And I would say that, you know, the key thing is to get the foot in the door, whatever way you get that foot in, and then you can try and kind of slither your way into the fashion area. But I don't think you have to go and do a fashion degree, for instance. I think that now is not really necessary.
And I think a lot of, I don't know about you, but I feel a lot of people think of fashion as kind of one job. And actually there's so many different elements of the industry, aren't there? From marketing to digital to social to retail. So I think it's also about kind of exploring the industry as a whole and working out where your passion fits within the model. And then, as you say, being quite tough and resilient and being willing to start at the bottom and work your way up and fight's the wrong word, but be very forceful, I suppose. We have another question. What form will magazines take as digital offerings, do you think? Is there any future for a traditional self-contained magazine-like product, or are magazines becoming a multitude of Instagram posts and likes?
Oh, well, let's hope they're not becoming a multitude of Instagram posts and likes. That would be a very tragic thing for a magazine to become. Yeah, I think I said early on, I think there is absolutely a role for a magazine. I mean, and I don't know whether you agree, but, one of the things about magazines is that they are put together by people who do know what they're talking about, and they're not just randomly putting in things that they like or they don't have any kind of knowledge about. And I think the more kind of knowledgeable the staff, the better the magazine. I mean, I'm not quite sure if that was a question about whether physical copies of magazines still have a role or not.
Yeah, I suppose it's a broader question. I would interpret it as is what role does a magazine have in this world of digital where we're always on? And I'm sure you, like me, pick up your phone before you get out of bed in the morning.
I always find this a little difficult because I really love magazines, and I was brought up with, print all around me, and, I come from a generation who do love magazines, and I can't really get myself into a headset to think that people can't see the difference between what it's like to sit down at a table and flip through a magazine to scrolling through the phone. I mean, I do all the scrolling through the phone. I look at everything on my screen, but I feel very differently about picking up a copy of House and Garden or a physical copy of the New Yorker or the New Statesman magazine, or indeed your magazine. I mean, for instance, I always buy Grazia at the airport. It's part of my ritual. A train station or an airport, I'll always buy Grazia because, I'm going to sit there on the train. I don't want to be looking at a screen all the time. And, I really, really enjoy it. I tear things out of it that I want to keep.
Thanks.
I find following up recommendations much easier too, because I tear everything out. So, there's a book or an album or something like that. Whereas actually on my screen, it sort of goes past and I think, well, that sounds good, I'll make a note. And then I forget. And then I'm on to another, Instagram post or email or whatever, unless I buy it immediately.
So I suppose your advice for us is to kind of play up the physicality and to play into the hands of print and what we can do with paper.
I think if you can, if you're allowed to, if you have the luxury, I mean, that's my feeling about magazines. I'm not sure whether I would say in 5 years' time, whether a magazine like Vogue will publish 12 times a year. I'm sure it will exist, but maybe it'll become a bigger, more sumptuous, more expensive, like, coffee table object that publishes, I don't know, once every 2 months or something. Hard to say, isn't it?
Yeah, if only we had the crystal ball. Now the questions are coming in thick and fast now, so we've only got 10 minutes left, so I want to make sure I get through as many of them as I can. So Michelle says, you mentioned that the issues you most enjoyed doing were the ones where you could shake things up. Could you give us any tips on keeping content fresh and shaking up the issues while still keeping the reader in mind?
Well, I think it helps to have a theme, actually, because it gives you kind of know you've got that, and then you can it's like a sort of totem pole, and you can hang things off it and everything. It's quite difficult, I think, just to have everything random, because then it's just a mess. But thinking about, different styles of layout, still using your same fonts, but actually having a different approach to layout, that immediately changes things. Or just getting people to contribute who you wouldn't normally think of contributing is also, I think, a really interesting way round. I'm trying to think about the ones that I've really, I think I always found that the theme, whether it's gold or royalty or parties or gardens or whatever, that's always been to me a really helpful way of chucking it all in the air, but knowing that it was going to come down with a bit of a shape.
Yeah. And that's interesting, like new writers and columnists, and I think that's an interesting area to think about. For me, note to self, Esme says, which I love as a question, what advice would you give to your 14-year-old self, because she is 14 and would love to work in fashion and journalism?
Okay, so Esme, definitely just read and look at as much as you can. I mean, if you want to work in journalism in particular, but fashion also, to have a large kind of pool of mental references is really good. So, look at every wonderful artists, read great poets, follow the designers, and read as much journalism as you can. Look at as many magazines as you can, both online and offline, so that you know what's there, what's come before, and you're just kind of bursting with ideas. That's the thing. I mean, it's all about ideas. That's why being a journalist, whether you're a fashion journalist or not, is so unbelievably exciting, because it is all about, doing something with ideas and being able to convey to people what you find interesting and what you love. So, but you've got to have some ideas, not just copy what's been there before.
Yeah, and that's what's so fun about it, isn't it? Is that we have such a luxury, really, that we get to talk about fun ideas all day. And I love this question from Stephen. I'm intrigued for the answer to this. Would you consider working on another magazine or launching your own?
I'd love to kind of do a one-off of a magazine, or probably one-off. Actually, I was going to say maybe a year, but no, I think
give yourself a break.
But I don't really want to work on another magazine. I mean, I think that I gave my best to Vogue, and I'm not sure that I would have anything particularly fresh to add to putting a magazine together now.
And what would that one-off be about?
I don't know, somebody asked me actually last year or something they were working on a magazine, and it was before all this happened, and it was kind of it was something that existed, but this was I could choose a theme for it. So it was a theme that, I'd be interested in doing something like that, editing a themed issue for an existing magazine. Would I like to start a magazine? Not really. Not really.
It'd be tough right now. Yeah. And last question, I think that we've got time for, sadly. Helena, we've talked a bit about covers, but she asks, what in your view is the formula for a successful cover, no matter what the genre is?
Gosh, what a good question, because it would be easy to answer that one. It depends what the magazine is. I tend to think a successful cover is one where you notice that it's different from the one before. I think quite often covers are incredibly formulaic, and one really doesn't look any different to another. So I think the first thing is people have to notice there's a new issue. It's quite an important thing. And then I think it is that it's recognizable as the magazine that it is. I mean, although it's got to be different from the one before, I think people like a kind of sense that it's their magazine. Magazines are kind of communities that people feel a part of, and they identify themselves by being people who read that magazine, whether it's Interiors or whether it's Q magazine or GQ or Vogue or Grazia. You are the kind of person who reads that magazine, and so I think the cover needs to make you still feel that it's the thing that you're part of, and not completely different would be my view.
And therein, I suppose, is the challenge, is to make it feel
original without totally different. Yeah,
which is the fine line, I suppose. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for great questions and for tuning in to this, our first in our new series of BSME Live webinars. That's sadly all we have time for today, which is a shame because I did not ask half of my questions, but maybe we can persuade Alexandra to come back another time. And in the meantime, please keep an eye on the BSME website and social channels for upcoming events, and also the news that the BSME Awards entries are opening from the 1st of September. So start thinking about what achievements you've done this year that you really want to celebrate as a brand. Big thanks to all the BSME team behind the screens, especially our amazing interns, Jasmina and Megan, who are graduates from the BA Journalism course at Roehampton University and definitely deserve a big shout out. So thanks to them, but mainly thank you so much, Alexandra, for joining us today and taking time to speak to us for those insights. And I know I've taken away quite a few ideas that I might be stealing, emulating, borrowing in issues to come for Grazia. So thank you so much to everyone, and it's goodbye from us.
Goodbye, thank you.
Take care. Bye.